Pesach. You know what I mean? And there's just so many elevations, that are coming out. And it's just like so important to really take advantage of this time going into Pesach. You know what I'm saying? Like this is like the time to really learn. You got free time, you got an extra free 10 minutes. Okay, boom, open, learn a Mishnah, learn a different part of, for Pesach, a halakha, whatever, you know what I'm saying? All these different types of things. And so it's just very important, right? It's very, very, very important. And to take advantage because there's so much incredible light happening. Like everyone's waiting for the Seder, right? The light's happening now. You know what I mean? If the Shefa is coming down now. Now the apex of this transition is going to be, after Shabbos. There's another thing that's very interesting about it being after Shabbat, right? Is this idea of like you get such a purification after Shabbat. I mean, during Shabbat, and then after Shabbat, you feel a high, you're there, you feel connected, you're ready to do things, but you just feel the Kedusha. And to be able to go into Pesach with such purity, right, is a really unique situation, right? And it's a really fascinating idea. And the thing we don't realize is that part of us connecting to this level of Pesach that we're at right now is in the consciousness of Purim. Like we receive such an elevation of Purim, we don't even realize it, right? We don't even realize, like, you know what? We just had an elevation for Purim, and we did all this work and this and tzedakah and l'chaim, the whole thing, right? And so you have that monstrous light, that is, in essence coming down. You know what I mean? And it's just so important to be aware of all the steps that happen, to get us here. We think about those powerful lights of Hanukkah, right? We think, oh, Hanukkah. No, these things are elevations. Where we're at right now is elevation. You said last week, you said, wow, I could feel the energy. Yeah, because you're making those connections. You could feel the Shefa coming down now. This is the whole month is light, and then it's, and so anyways, so I want to continue on this like Pesach prep. We're in Pesach prep. We're focused on Pesach. Pesach is not just a ceremonial meal that we do about the Exodus, but rather it's the aspect of our most inner aspects of ourself, a part that we don't even know about ourselves, the essence of ourselves, receive this enormous amount of light from the heavens. And this enormous amount of light goes into the neshama, and the neshama fuels the entire body. And the actions of this body create effects and ripple effects for the whole world, right? So that's what we're focused on, right? And so the learning for Pesach allows us to bind ourselves to Pesach, to bind ourselves. Now, looking back on in retrospect, could we covered more topics? You know, yeah, maybe. Maybe. But you know what? What was more important this year for me, with everyone, all of us, is the dynamic of the dynamic of, just thinking about, like, the thought came to me about just thinking about, like, just the idea of, just like really like thinking about, like, all the different people in India, who need a lot of support, right? And it's like we're learning this powerful Torah and we're elevating these types of things. And that was the idea, is to say that it was so important to build these concepts of leadership, right? And really focus on that principle of leadership because a lot of, okay, we can learn the halacha, you can learn more, this, lots of this. We're going to do a good job. We're going to have a base understanding of what to do for Pesach, right? We're going to get there. But what's more important is the thinking process that you're going into Pesach on. Because every year you're going to get better at it. You know what I'm saying? Like every year you're going to get better at it. Every year you're going to understand more. You're going to say things better. You're going to pronounce things more clear. It's a growing process. But the point is, you don't need to do those things perfectly to connect to the light force of the Creator. The light force of the Creator is there when your heart is open. When you see attributes and you see things that you want to obtain and you ask the Creator to provide those things for you, you'll get them. So, how do you know what you need? So, in this process, we're learning about leadership, right? And a lot of these qualities we may have innately, but they have to bring them out more. We had to refine ourselves with these things. So, going into this Pesach, when we think about this year, next year will be something else we're focused on. It could be leadership too, but a different aspect of it. But it won't be where we're at now, right? But this year, Hashem, brought the inspiration to one learn by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was extremely clear. Baruch Hashem, Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And then the second point is, the fact that we could focus on the faculty of leadership and not leadership in a secular sense. Like we're reading a book about leadership written by, Henry, E. Franks. I just made up the name. No, we're reading about it from the Torah, number one, from a Jewish perspective, number two, and by a source that's extremely refined, right? And so, um, and so, and so that aspect of someone who's worked on themselves and worked on their heart and worked on their spirituality, being able to learn from that person's perspective, right? You're not just learning from a guy who's like, oh, I'm an intellectual and I'm a genius and I figured this out and I figured that out and I put all these things together. No, no, no. We're talking about someone who's transformed their nature over and over again throughout their lives and they live in that reality. Someone who's responsible for the lives of people who are keeping mitzvot, not an army, not a corporation, right? People are keeping mitzvot. He's responsible for that. So you know what type of work you have to do in yourself in that? How much of a chassid you have to be as Ramchal, how much separation you have to have from things. Now he's not out partying. He's not at Diddy parties. You know what I'm saying? So we get to learn his perspective and we're building that into that because on the Seder night is in all the mechanisms of leadership that we connected to are all going to manifest on us. Right? You're going to just know things. You're going to have insight to things, and whatever. You're going to have all these things are just going to come after your Seder. Things are just going to be, just manifesting, right? And so, from that perspective, um, it's just that important to just understand that, right? Because it's like one of the things that I feel like, I think, Phil, whatever, that really made me strong in learning and being able to sit for so many years of learning because I was able to see it as a mechanism to receive light, right? So like if I was going to go out and do business, I would want to do business ultimately, like say I'm saying post Kabbalah Center, right? Before, forget about it, right? But post Kabbalah Center, my understanding of doing was, making a lot of money and then I'll give money away to Sadaka and that type of thing. And I evolved, right? I went on and on and on and on. But the point is to say that the point is to say that the point is to say that the business would just be a conduit to be able to get to the point to receive that light, right? Because I still had to do things that were holy in order to transform that raw energy of money or whatever into something holy, right? But once you did that, you made your connection. And it grew and grew and grew, and now I'm at a point that, like, when I came here to Israel, it was just like light nonstop all day, and I was like, whoa, I'm addicted, and and so that's where we want to be at. That we're not just learning information, we're receiving light, we're receiving energy. You're receiving energy that's going into your soul, right? Because if we have that perspective, then you could just really go and go and go and go and go and go. And you say, and it's not like you're just like it's not like a high. You know what I'm saying? Like we're just, oh, I mean, it has those moments for sure, but it's still it's a certain strength you can see yourself building up, right? And so anyway, so that's where. Okay, so with all that said, we got to talk these things out. But with that being said, only 13 minutes, right? So we want to go into Parsha Besallah. No, I mean, yeah, sorry. Not Besalach, sorry. Hold on. I think it's Besalach. Yeah, Besalach. So, okay, so this is a very important thing, right? Because this is a part of this would normally be a part of the leadership series, but right now we're speaking in such the context of the Voda of Pesach, right? And that light of Pesach is coming into this world. We're speaking in that capacity. So it says like this. It says the Israelites had crossed the Red Sea. The impossible had happened. The mightiest army in the ancient world, the Egyptians, with their horses drawn chariots, had been defeated and drowned. He says, but the people were now free, but the relief proved short lived. Almost immediately, the airstrikes faced attacks by Amalek, and they had to fight a battle, this time with no apparent miracle from God. He says, they did so and won, and this was a decisive turning point in history, not only for the Israelites, but for Moses and his leadership of the people. Okay, so he starts off, the impossible happened. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, this is the beginning of this is the beginning of the concept of the Jewish people, of the Israelites, the nation of Israel. Right now, it starts off in the concept of impossibility. They are faced with impossible. So that's what makes us different as people. We start at impossible and figure out how to make it happen, right? People figure out how to make things happen and stop at impossible. That's the other nations. We start at impossible. So we're talking about growth in business. If a guy's gonna do business, right? If a guy's gonna do business, and he's gonna say, I'm gonna make money and I'm gonna make a lot of money and I'm gonna give a lot of money in tzedakah and I'm gonna grow the rabbinut in America and the rabbinut in Africa and I'm gonna help tons of people and I'm gonna provide for people for Pesach and all these humongous things. Their mindset is like saying, hey, you know what? Am I thinking big enough? Am I working at a company at the level that really shows my potential? Why am I not taking over companies? Because God, because God creates reality. And if I have objectives to give to his children, to give to his people, right? Why am I not asking for more? For them, not for me. I'm good. I'm good right now. I'm good right now. But you know what? What if I could write a check and provide a Pesach Seder for everybody in Igbo land? I just locked down everybody. Everybody got Seder plates. Everybody got grape juice. The same thing I have at Chabad. I worked a package, for 20,000 families. That's real levels, right? So what am I starting at impossible? I gotta go bigger. I have to go bigger for the sake of the people. And guess what? Hashem will split the Red Sea. He says the contrast between before and after the Red Sea could be more complete. Before facing the approaching Egyptians, Moses said to the people, stand still and you will see the deliverance that the Lord will bring you today. He says, and the Lord will fight for you. And you need only to be silent. In other words, do nothing. God will do it for you. And he did. He says, in the case of the Amalekims, however, Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and prepare for battle against the Amalek. Joshua did so, and the people waged war. And this was a great transition. The Israelites moved from a situation of in which the leaders of God will help God with the help of God did everything for the people. He says to one in which the leaders empower the people to do it for themselves. So there's this guy. His name is I think his name is Retnitz, and he's like in LA. He's like some rich guy, right? But check this out. The Mir Yeshiva is one of the biggest, yeshivas in the world, right? Like the Mir, and you have another yeshiva called BMG, Beis Midrash Gedolah, which is in New Jersey, Lakewood, New Jersey. Those are the two biggest ones. So the Mir is a very prestigious place. I have the privilege of learning in the Mir, different shiurim, different situations. Even gave over in the Mir Beis Midrash, right, which is like a big deal. But the point is to say that there's a guy named Retnitz, and there's probably like around 7,000 guys. Like Or Sameach, where I started at, was around 400 guys there. So this place that I'm talking about is probably closer to um, um, the place that I went to was like the start at that was 400, and so the Mir Yeshiva is like 7,000, 8,000, right? So it's like all these guys learning whatever. So it's this one guy who writes a check for the whole thing. I think it's like $30 million. He pays for the properties, he pays for all the learning, he pays for the housing for the yeshiva, the meals for the yeshiva, the salaries for the rabbis, everything. He just gets all that light. And this guy's doing like a couple $100 million, 150, $130 million a year in cash, whatever his business ventures are. So there's guys out there doing tremendous light. See, you don't see that on TV though. You see what I'm saying? You don't see that, but that's really the backstory of the Jewish community. These families may not even be that religious, right, in their own personal observance, but they're doing so many things that are providing for people to do mitzvahs. And so all those mitzvahs that they're a part of, that strength in the world, it brings more parnasa. So when you see these families that have these dynasties and these lineages, and they've been passing it on, these families, the backstories are humongous philanthropists. Humongous philanthropists. Look at these universities, the names they have on the walls, the whole thing. And so the thing is, that's the level, right? That's the level is to be like, I mean, I wish I was in that position right now to provide seders for the Igbos. You know what I'm saying? And obviously families in America, families in Israel for sure. But I'm just saying, but just the spirit that there's people begging to keep the mitzvahs. You know what I'm saying? And you just like, and you're supporting that, that whole thing. So those are the imagination points we should be at. How many people can I provide housing for? How many orphans can I provide housing for? How many, how much can I do to help people with curable diseases? Right. And it's not to say that, we're focused on that, but I'm saying like, why not take on these huge endeavors to remove pain and suffering from the world? Right. And the business is just a mechanism for you to do it in Kedusha, right? Because you're using your tzedakah to be able to fix the world's problems. Right? And so when we ask God to elevate our situation, when we ask God to elevate us, to elevate our status, to elevate our level, it's for the sake of other people. I want to provide for more people. And if a person focuses on it, they become a channel for Shefa. They have to say, I have to increase my philanthropy level, period. And the only way I could do that is by expanding my business, is expanding it. Maybe I had to go work with a larger corporation. Maybe work with newer companies, take over, take different positions, right? So the point is the same because this business and this stuff is just a vehicle to serve God. That's what we makes us different than than the non-Jewish world. Business for us is just a mechanism to serve God. It's a way to deal with people with good conduct. It's a way to provide for my family, and it's a way to have sustenance to be able to take 10% and give it to situations that are improving the world, that are removing pain and suffering, right? And I want to have an imagination of being able to how to expand that on a massive level. So he says, as this happens, the Torah focuses on the attention to detail. As the battle begins, he says, all right, let me go back a little bit. He says, in the case of the Amalekis, however, Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and prepare. And he says, choose men for us. I mean, he said, choose men for us and prepare to battle against Amalek. Joshua did so. The people waged war, and this was a transition. The Israelites moved from the situation in which the leader, with God, with the help of God, did everything for the people, right, which is the Yam Suf, and into one in which the leader empowered the people to do it themselves. He said, as this happened, the Torah focuses attention on details. The battle begins. Moses climbs up to the top of a hill and overlooks the battlefield with the staff in his hand. As the Torah says, as long as Moshe held his hand up, the people, the Israelites prevailed. But when he let his hands down, the Amaleki prevailed. When Moses' hands became weary, they took a stone and placed it underneath him so that he would be able to sit on it. Aaron and Hur then held his hand, one on each side, and his hand remained steadily until sunset. He says, what was going on here? He's asking questions. So, Frank, what's his hand up? Put your hands in the sky. Was this one of these things? So he says, maybe that's what they're talking about. And he says, what is going on here? The passage could be read in two ways: the staff in Moses' hands, and with which he had performed miracles, which he had performed miracles in Egypt and at the sea, might be a signal that the Israelites' victory was a miracle, was a miraculous one. Alternatively, it might simply be a reminder to the Israelites that God was with them, giving them strength. Okay, so this passage about Moses raising his hand, he said, could be understood in two ways: the staff in Moses' hand, which performed the miracles, and at the sea. Okay, might be a sign that the Israelites' victory was miraculous. Alternatively, it might simply be a reminder that the Israelites had God's strength with them. So he's saying, in his opinion, there's two ways to understand it. I think there's more, but I'm sure he knows that too. But these are two ways he likes to look at it. Very unusually, since the Mishnah in general is a book of law rather than a biblical commentary, the Mishnah revolves the question: what did the hand of Moses make, or did the hand of Moses make or break the course of the war? Rather, the text implies that whenever the Israelites looked up and dedicated their hearts to the Father in heavens, they prevailed, but otherwise they failed. He says the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says the Mishnah is clear. Neither the staff nor Moses' upraised hand were performing a miracle. And they were simply reminding the Israelites to look up to the heavens and to remember that God was with them. And this gave them the confidence and the courage to win. This is big stuff, bro. He's saying when they say, raise your hands in the air, right? Or when Moses raised his hands in the air, right? He's saying that the Mishnah pretty much is saying that he raised his hands up because the people would look up at Moses and he had his hands up towards the sky. And as the people looked up, they remembered Hashem. And then when they were connected to Hashem, they had the strength. They became victorious. The fundamental principle of leadership is being taught here. A leader must empower the team. He cannot do the work for them, but he must do it for themselves. They must do it for themselves. But he must, at the same time, give them the absolute confidence that they can do it and succeed. The leader is responsible for their mood and moral. During the battle, he must betray no sign of weakness, doubt, or fear. That is not always easy. Moses' hands became weary. All leaders have their moments of exhaustion. At such times, the leaders need support. Even Moses needed help of Aaron and Hur, and in the end, though his uprise hands were the signal of the Israelites needed that God was giving them the strength to prevail, and they did. He says, in today's terminology, the leader needs emotional intelligence. Daniel Goldman, best known for his work in his field, argues best work in this field argues that one of the most important tasks of a leader is to shape and lift the mood of the team. Great leaders move us, they ignite our passion and inspire us inspire the best in us. When we try to explain why we are so effective, why they are so effective, we speak of strategy, vision, or powerful ideas. But the reality is much more primal. Great leaders work through their emotions. He says through groups had an emotional. He said groups have an emotional temperament. As individuals, they can be happy or sad. They obligated a guided. What is this word? A guided or calm, fear or confident. But they, but when they come together as a group, they possess a unterment emotional, I guess, congregation. I don't know. He said takes place. So he says a process of attunement, emotional contaction takes place, and they begin to share the same feelings. You know, it's interesting too. They say when women even live like in dorms, they all like over time like develop the same like menstrual cycle process. Oh no, I heard that. I don't know if this is true. Anyways, so maybe I shouldn't say that. Yeah, scientists have shown experimentally how within 15 minutes of starting a conversation, two people begin to converge in the psychological markers of mood, such as a rare as a mood such as post rate. When three strangers sit face to face in silence for a minute or two, the one who is most emotionally impressive transmits his or her mood to the other two without speaking in a single word. The psychological base of his process knows as mirroring has been much studied in recent years and observed even among primates. It is based it is the base of empathy through which we enter into the other people's feelings. So he's basically talking about like, like different like theories, case studies, whatever, about people interacting with each other. But he's saying at the same time, and you probably have noticed this too, like, even great basketball coaches, great coaches in sports in general, they were able to tap into the emotions of their team, right? And they knew how to speak to them. And, sometimes like, like I remember in high school, like I had this one coach in football, and like he kind of like, he would always really talk harsh to me, and I guess that was his way of trying to motivate me. But I didn't respond to that language. I respond to like praise. I respond to, focusing on my higher attributes, and that makes me go further, right? But he never understood that really. I mean, I was able to self motivate myself and kind of ignore things, but people, you have to see how people are motivated. What motivates people? What are they into? Okay, so he says this is the foundation of one of the most important roles of a leader. It is he or she who is is he or she who more than others determine the mood of the group. The Goldman reports several scientific studies showing how leaders play a key role in determining the group's emotion. Leaders typically talk more than anyone else. And what they say, he says, and what they said was listened to more carefully. But the impact on emotion goes beyond what the leader says. His studies, he says, in these studies, even when the leaders were not talking, they were watched more carefully than anyone else in the group. When people raised a question, when people raised a question for a group as a whole, they could keep their eyes on the leader to see his or her response. Indeed, group members generally see the leader's emotional reaction as the most valid response, and so model their own on, particularly in ambiguous situation where various members react differently. In a sense, the leader sets the emotional standard. He says, when it comes to leadership, even nonverbal cues are important. Leaders, at least in public, must project confidence, even if inwardly they are full of doubt and hesitation. If they betray their private fears in words or gestures, they risk demoralizing the group. He said, there is no. He said, you hear that? That's a very important point. He's saying, like, leadership is being the person that needs to inspire those people to do what they need to do to move things forward, right? He says there is no more powerful example of this than the episode of which King David's son Absalom mounted a coup against his father, proclaiming himself king in the palace. David troops put down the rebellion, and in the course of which Absalom dies, caught by his hair in a tree, and stabbed to death by Joab, David's chief commander in chief. When he broke the news, David was is heartbroken. His son may have rebelled against him, but he's still his son. Devastated by his death, he covered his face and cried, "Oh, my son, Absalom, Absalom, my son." He said, news of David's grieving quickly spread throughout the army, and they too, by emotional emotional contagion, were overcome by it by mourning. He said Job's regard this as disastrous. The army had taken great risks to fight for David against his son. They cannot start regretting their victory without creating confusion and fatefully undermining their moral. So this is what he says. Job went on into the house of the king and said, "Today you have humiliated all of your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines." He says, "And you love those who hate you, and you hate those who love you. And you have made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. And you see what would be pleased if Absalom were alive today, and all of us were dead. Now go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. And this will be worse for you than all the calamities that you come from you now, from your youth till now." He says in Jacob, and he says in David as Job did as Job assisted, Joab. So, anyways, that Joab assistant, and he accepted that there is a time and place for grief, but not now, not here, and above all, not in public. Now, this is the time to thank the army for its courage and its defense of the king. He says the leaders may sometimes silence their private emotions if they are not to demoralize those they lead. In the case of the battle against Amalek, the first battle the Israelites had to fight for themselves, Moses had a vital role to perform, and he had to give the people confidence by getting them to look up. And he says in 1875, an amateur uh, uh, archaeologist, Misereno di Santanto, this is a Spanish guy, became excavating the ground in the cave in Altamira near the north coast of Spain. At first, he found a little. He found a little. At first, he found little to interest him, but his curiosity was rekindled by a visit to Paris Exposition in 1878, where a collection of Ice Age implantments and art objects were on display. Determined to see whether he could find equally Arctic relics, he returned to the cave in 1879. He says, and one day he took his 9-year-old daughter Mira with him, and while he was searching through the rubble, he wandered deeper into the cave, and to their amazement saw something on the wall above her. He says, look, Poppy Ox. He says, she said that they were in fact a bison, and she had made one of the great discoveries of the prehistoric art of all time, the magnificent Almeri paintings, cave paintings between 25,000 and 35,000 years old were so unprecedented a finding that it took 22 years for their authenticity to be accepted. The 4 years for 4 years, Salmutua had been within a few feet of the monumental treasure, but he missed it for one reason. He forgot to look up. He says the one ongoing theme of the Tanakh is the need to look up, to lift your eyes on high, to see that the Creator, that see who created these things, says Isaiah, and lift up my eyes from the hills and from my help, and says King David. And Deuteronomy, he says, Moshe tells the Israelites the promised land will be not like the flat land of the Nile Delta, whether it is plentiful and regularly stopped. But he said it is the begin. It will be a land of hills and valleys, entirely dependent on unpredictable rain. It will be a landscape that forces its inhabitants to look up. And that is what Moses did for the people in the battle. He taught them to look up. He says, no political, social, or moral achievement is without formidable obstacles. And he says, and there are vested interests to be confronted, attitudes to change, and resistance to be overcome. The problems are immediate, and ultimate goal often frustratingly falls far away. Every collective undertaking is like leading a nation across the wilderness towards the destination that is always more distant than it seems when you look at the map. He says, look down on the difficulties, and you can give away to despair. He says the only way to sustain energy, individuals or as a collective, is to turn your gaze towards the horizon of hope. The philosopher Igwig Gingsting once said that his aim in philosophy was to show the fly the way out of the fly bottle. The fly is trapped in a bottle. It searches for a way out. Repeatedly, it bangs its head against the glass until at last, exhausted, it dies. He says, yet the bottle been has been open all the time. The one thing the fly forgets to do is to look up. And sometimes we do. So sometimes we do. He says the task of a leader is to empower, but it is also his or her task to inspire. In this, he says, and that is Moses did, and this is what Moses did when at the top of a hill, in full sight of the people, he raised his hand and staff to heavens. And when they saw this, the people knew they could prevail, not by might or by power, but by spirit, said Prophet Zechariah. And he says, the Jewish history is a sustained set of variations on this theme. A small people that, in the face of difficulties, continue to look up, will win great victories and achieve great things. So, in the spirit of Pesach, I don't know if there's more of an important message than that, right? And to share this idea of like the Seder is about endurance, right? Even the physical Seder itself is about endurance, but also the Seder, the reorganization, is that ability to see the Most High. You hear the Hebrew Israelites say that, like the Most High, and it's an important point, because you know, it's an important point because it's like you have to stay focused. You have to stay focused. You have to understand the full picture, right? You have to understand that any difficulties, any struggles you get is a blessing. You should be so happy because you are correcting your soul. You're doing the work. And thank God that you're not one of these people who are going through difficulties are like, oh man, look what happened to me, man. Look how bad my life is. It's like, no, I'm suffering. Momish, I'm suffering. But this suffering, this is what you're supposed to be going through. Every day can't be a vacation. Every day can't be people cheering for you. Some days you get embarrassed, right? Some days things don't work out. You know, some things don't work out. You got to thank Hashem. You're here to serve Hashem. You can't control other people. You can't control what they do, but you control what you do in that situation. Any thoughts, reflections?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Lord, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs is giving us so much clock. It's just amazing, his perspectives. I was reviewing in Mislat Yesharim, and it was saying how, in our life, it's not made for us to, as you were just saying, to have happiness or certain, places of joy. Like a person lives 70 years, 80 years, and their life is toil and pain, because our purpose in this life is to stand up to those obstacles that come before us. That's our purpose, to have the endurance to overcome them. And as we're reading now, like when Amalek came, Amalek has the gematria of Safek, which means doubt. When the doubt came, you know, Hashem sends that doubt to you so you can look up, so you can understand that it all comes from Him, that you have the power to overcome this situation, and it's only going to draw you closer to Him. And in that verse was one of my favorite verses in Shemot 17:12. And Rabbi Shalom Arush brings it out in his Sefer, Garden of Knowledge, that when Moshe's hands, they were steady to the coming of the sun. When we read it Hebraically, it says that his hands were amuna to the coming of the sun. His amuna allowed him to get through the darkness. Like we know every single day that the sun is going to rise. That's one of the, principles of creation, that the sun will come the next day. And if you stay in amuna, your darkness will dissipate. If you stay in Amuna, that darkness will be, enlightened, and you'll be able to see your way. And it's only through looking up. It's only through connecting to Hashem. So, even in every, situation in our life, every, every challenge that we have is to draw us close, and it's to empower us. It's to give us the ability to reach the depths within ourselves and to find that power that you didn't know you had. And you're only going to get there through certain conditions that are difficult. That's the only way. That's the only way. Bnei Israel were created through difficulty in the the subjugation of the Egyptian bondage. But that's what made them the nation of Israel. That's what made them, appropriate vessels to receive the Torah. Only through that difficulty. So in this life, we're designed to overcome everything that comes before us. Like it says in Bereshit, sin crouches at the door, but you can't overcome. You will overcome. You must overcome it. So having those, thoughts in mind, especially when we come to the Pesach Seder, we come to this time of divine light, we must remind ourselves that we can overcome. We were designed to win. All the cards in our deck are made for us to win. It's loaded for us to win. No matter how it seems on the outside, Hashem is giving us the power already. Like, and I heard you. I think you were doing an interview with Jerusalem Scribe, and you was bringing out how the seed was designed to split way before Bnei Israel even came to it. It was going to split on that day, whether there or not. The impossible is already possible. We just have to have the Amunah. We just got to have the faith to know that Hashem is with us at all times.
Yeah. So, what you say? Were you saying? I apologize.
Say it again, Ralph?
Were you speaking? I didn't know. Did I cut you off?
Oh no, no, you good.
No, no, I just wanted to just say, like, I mean, that what you said was like a perfect analysis. And the thing is, the Torah, the mitzvot, the learning is the Shabbos, the Yom Tovim. It gives us the strength throughout the year to persevere. Every section of time, there is a particular Yom Tov, right? So the spring has what? Nisan. The summer has what? Rosh Hashanah and Tu B'Av, right? Tu B'Av, the 3 weeks, the whole thing, right? the and then you have towards the end of the summer going into the process of the end of the harvesting season, which is Sukkot, right? And then after Sukkot, you go into this process of the winter of darkness. What do you have? You have Hanukkah. As you go through the process of Hanukkah, this process of Hanukkah, it leads you to the beginning of the year, which is this transition, slowly entering the process of spring. What do we have? Tu B'Shvat, right? The trees. And then from Tu B'Shvat, we have what? From Tu B'Shvat, we have Purim, right? And then from Purim, we have to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. From Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we have what? Pesach. And it just goes on. So all of these connections we have at the year is the entity that gives us the strength to persevere in a way that you just described. Each of the Torah portions is connected to an aspect of strength, right? I remember like when we were like as seniors in high school, we were like so like obsessed to go to college and play sports, whatever. We're like taking creatine during the summertime and that whole thing and just working out, that whole thing. And the point is just saying that these different points, the way the Hebrew calendar is designed, is there to give the souls of Israelites, the Kedusha, to overcome that. That's one point. Second point is saying that, and this is something to always remember, right? Like forever, forever, forever. Whenever we're faced with a situation that seems impossible, that is God letting us know that you're a Jew. Because God just only gives the Jew the challenge of impossibility. Because we got the tools to manifest the miracle. So impossibility in being a Jew is synonymous. Look at the state of Israel. They're just like, hey, there's this little country, you know, surrounded by enemies, mostly like young kids running the country, and it works. It functions, you know. It functions, right? And most things are like this. Anyways, I'm gonna give another class, probably like 14:50. So like probably like maybe like at like 17 o'clock. I'm giving another class, and I'm gonna continue on with the Pesach prep with going finishing the dynamic of the Haggadah with Rabbi Sachs, just going through the order of the night, basically. So if you could do it at 17, even if you just like, have it plugged in your ears, you know what I mean? If you're working and doing something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect. I'm about to dive in now, so I should be wrapping up around that time, diving in and get the daily study in. So yep, send me a
Cool,
link.
cool.
I'll lock in.
All right, so we'll be in touch like a couple hours.
Percussion.
All right. Well,